Okay, so now that was a nice minute of a pause for Jamie and Viev to reflect on two questions that they've developed for themselves, and we'll do that until about 20 after.
Ah, great. So I'm actually I'd love to, I feel like I've talked quite a bit today. So I'm gonna ask Jamie a couple questions. And, I also think it's really important that if these questions stir something in you, put something in the chat or even raise your hand to be part of a conversation. So it can really be a group effort. But the question that we had come up with to start with is just, and you can ask this for yourself. I'm going to ask Jamie and to share what Jamie has been significant about today. You're muted. You're muted. He's in the other room, so I get to yell to him. Hold on. You're muted, babe.
I knew that. I just didn't remember how to unmute myself. Would you give the second question too?
Sure. So both the significance and to what has been significant to you today. Also, what are we doing when we're doing Insight? And what have we done today that has been Insight? So, and how have we been doing Insight today?
If I had a say in those questions, I'd certainly change them now. This is a humble, we've been talking about vulnerability, vulnerable place to be at the end of the day. There are still, how many? 49 people on our Zoom, which is extraordinary. It's been a wonderful day. The fact that I get to talk about what's been significant about it and about the Insight approach in that regard is extremely humbling and vulnerable, because I'm only one of those 49 or 50 pieces, voices and faces on here. I think I can reflect a little bit about how I see myself positioned in this flow, and maybe that'll help other people do that too, or help me get it clearer by the critiques you might be able to advance. But one thing that I found really interesting and significant and valuable is as part of the self-positioning is locating, but I'm curious about it too, is locating ourselves, not only this because of this day in Canada, but it's a practice that's done before that, in terms of our land and the native peoples who've gone before us. So I'm, as Viev said earlier, I'm in New York. The land was originally peopled by the Lenape, who are a group of members of the Algonquin peoples. I grew up in Wisconsin, where the peoples there, where I lived, and actually celebrated them through Boy Scouts and other things, were the Menominee and the Potawatomi peoples, some of the Ho-Chunk as well. And I guess what I'm wondering from the Insight perspective is, what am I doing when I'm doing that? Why does that feel as significant as it does to me? Particularly if I think about my tribe, my peoples, they actually did come to New York in the 1820s, came from Wales, and many of them are buried in paupers' graves in Brooklyn. I feel moved by that. I feel that that's a significant practice, and others of you can help me understand, how is that carrying my sense of myself and my sense of connection with history and my sense of connection to the past? I'm not really sure, but that's what the Insight approach would help us to understand. For the day, I think all of us come at this event with a role, and I don't think we can. That's how we're in this whitewater, and my role in this is somebody who's been an Insight theorist, somebody who's been involved in Insight for over a decade, somebody who's one of the founders of EC, So that's different from others of you. It gives me a certain perspective on valuing this in general. And when we value from the insight approach, as you know, there are 4 levels that we talk about. We talk about, I mean, valuing is that, well, first of all, it's that act where we discern the significance of something, and we do it in terms of what's personal, what's practical, what's relational, what's institutional. Insight's really helpful in giving us those categories to think about what's going on. And as we talked about threat earlier today, it was like, well, is this threat a personal one? Is it a practical one? Is it an institutional threat? What's going on for us? So for me today, from a well, I'll take the practical first. The practical significance for me, and I'm sure this would be different for other people, but the practical significance for me today was the conversation we had in the circle that Jackie drew of us. It came out, and I think this was Shirley who mentioned it first, that there's a spiritual dimension implicit to the insight approach. And for me, who was trained as a theologian and who's working on the relationship of insight and spirituality right now, that's practically really very interesting. It makes me, it makes the Megan linked valuing to futures and threats to futures. And she's right about this, but in the positive sense, in the opportunity sense, rather than the threat and the gap sense, it's a way to have a conversation about the spiritual dimension of what we're doing when we're paying attention to our consciousness, and what we're doing when we commit to transforming conflict is really extraordinary. And there's a group of people here among us and outside that would like to have that conversation. I think that's quite amazing. So to use Megan's image, if what insight does is try to pick out the whisper in the noisy room, the spiritual dimension of insight is to find, I suppose it was associated with Isaiah and the whirlwind, but to find the still small voice inside the whisper in the noisy room. And to begin to recognize how that pulls us towards self-transcendence, how that tugs us to care about what's going on and to put our lives at risk in South Sudan or in Mozambique or in South Africa, or to make all the difference in the world in Canada now and reconciling. So from that practical thing, I've just feel bursts of hope in myself, which are relational as in that other category, in the sense that all of you have performed your roles here in this budding EC community extraordinarily well. You've been here, you've stayed. There's still, my God, everybody's still here. And you participated. So personally, I find that extraordinarily gratifying. I find it, as I said, I find it hopeful. And on an institutional level, when we started EC, we believed that it could happen. We believed that it would work. This was 6 months ago. We're starting a journal where, as you know, there's some public events that happen every month. But the real focus was, could we do another summit in which the community that we had together before would come back and show their interest in the diversity from across the world, and to create the kind of patterns of cooperation and relationships that we need to go forward and do what Andrea many years ago performed with Andrea many years ago called the Insight Revolution. And there's a sign here that it's really happening. I find that extraordinarily significant. Now, those are the things that are significant to me in my role, in my valuing of those 4 levels. One of the things this is the last thing I'll say. One of the things was extraordinary for me in the circle that I experienced with Jackie, but also just in general, is that this is a carrier. We say space a lot, but in some ways it's a carrier of our minds to have everybody have the opportunity to stay exactly where they're coming from, and we grow and we develop and we learn from that process. So I just want to thank all of you. I'm glad there's another day of this. I hope I see all of you tomorrow. And for some reason, my hands are shaking. So apparently what I'm saying is vulnerable to me. And I'm grateful that you stuck around.